I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar from the American Nuclear Society's Risk-Informed, Performance-Based Principles and Policy Committee, RP3C. My name is Prasad Kadambi, and I'm chair of RP3C. The purpose of RP3C is to help modernize ANS standards. Modernization has come to mean that risk-informed and performance-based methods are employed to overcome the difficulties that we all know about from purely deterministic and prescriptive methods. We've been calling these methods RIPB approaches. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, which is the topic of today's presentation, specifically recognizes a role for RIPB approaches, and that's what we'll be talking about more. There's a lot of guidance available on RIPB approaches, but most people have not had reason to become familiar with the guidance because the conventional approaches still dominate most things we do, including standards development. Right now, ANS can be considered as a knowledge center for RIPB information. RP3C initiated these community of practice webinars on RIPB to enable practitioners of RIPB approaches to share their knowledge and experience. We have scheduled these webinars for the last Friday of every month, and we'll try to keep you well informed on what the upcoming webinars will be. So please stay tuned and participate and come forward with your own suggestions if you have any. So today what I'm going to cover is a new entity within ANS called the Advanced Reactors Working Group, and what we are trying to do and accomplish relative to the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act. Next slide, Kathy. So this is the outline and purpose. I'll cover what is the ARWG, the Advanced Reactor Working Group. How does this working group work to propose ANS positions? What is the common ground between what the Advanced Reactor Working Group does, the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, and the ANS work on risk-informed and performance-based approaches? Then I'd like to do something of a deep dive into NEIMA and how it covers RIPB. I'd like to then talk about the value proposition that ANS brings into realizing the outcome objectives of NEIMA. And then, what is the broader implication of ANS involvement as a stakeholder? And I'll summarize after that. So the purpose of this particular presentation is to initiate the formulation of an ANS position on how NEIMA's objectives are to be achieved relative to RIPB concepts and methods. Next slide. So the Advanced Reactors Working Group was instituted in December 2021, about a month ago. And the ANS president, Steve Nesbitt, asked me to lead this. And we now have a vice chair for the group, Mihai, I dare not say his last name, but he's in the North Carolina State University. And what we are trying to do is bring together 4 divisional components of ANS into the working group. This would be the working group itself is under the Operations and Power Division. We have then the Nuclear Installation Safety Division. We have the Fuel Cycle and Waste Management Division. And then we have the Standards Committee. So, you know, together, what I'm hoping is that this represents the type of cross-section of divisions within ANS that can provide the coverage needed on advanced reactors. So the working group is to serve as a focal point and coordinator for ANS work related to advanced reactors. We'll try to monitor key developments and activities related to advanced reactors. We'll follow the rulemakings that are going on and propose opportunities for ANS leadership to get engaged. So the working group will try to, you know, foster standards development for advanced reactors to the extent that we can. And we will work with the ANS divisions to ensure that our ANS meetings and publications adequately cover advanced reactors. We will also try to support the government affairs part of ANS on advanced reactor policy issues and policy statements, position statements, so that they remain current. Next slide. The process by which we expect to develop proposals for ANS to consider is that we will first think about what proposals merit our attention. That would be where we can make some unique contribution on behalf of ANS regarding advanced reactors. The ANS contribution, I believe, should reflect technical depth of the knowledge of its members. The ANS proposals should promote realization of the promise of advanced reactors in some tangible way. ANS proposals should fill gaps in contributions made by other stakeholders, because certainly ANS is just one of several stakeholders involved in this activity. Now, of course, I want to make clear that what I'm saying in this presentation is entirely my own view, and I'm not trying to represent the working group's position or thoughts on this. You know, this is, as I say, just we are getting started, and I'm trying to get a discussion going amongst us and also with the rest of the community through this webinar today. So the expected steps in the process may be something like we as a working group agree to the subject matter to develop a proposal. We would assign specific division members to lead the development of the proposal. We would set the parameters such as the schedule and level of detail that we want. And we would finalize these drafts before we submit it to the ANS, and we would submit it either to the president or to the board for approval, depending on what is appropriate. Next slide. Okay, so let's see. Before I go on to this slide, I'd like to ask if there are any questions specific to the Advanced Reactor Working Group. amongst you all.
Say, Prasad, NEIMA is Nuclear Energy Institute, and what does the MA stand for?
It's Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act.
Okay, thank you so much. These acronyms always get me. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Prasad. Rob Hayes, NC State. I noticed that Oklo had their NRC submission rejected based on the claim that they didn't adequately go over their safety basis, and yet some of the material that was covered was also considered proprietary and so not open to the public. And so my question would be, is it possible to give these new reactor designers guidance on how to be thorough in their safety basis while still maintaining appropriate confidentiality of business sensitive material?
Rob, I would say that's one of the topics that is under discussion and consideration for us. I think it's, there's a lot of merit to it, but again, we are just getting started and I'm not quite sure how we would do it. But the Advanced Reactor Working Group would be the place to get something going. And I'm not sure what that is. But, again, we don't want to get into that right now because the group is just starting. So.
Well, Prasad, this is Jim. I think it's a great question. And I think it's something that maybe a slot in our program ought to be reserved for, because I think in the past, one of the problems that you've had with any new ideas in this nuclear world is that in their review, they get shared with virtually everyone, whether they're proprietary or not. And that's a problem.
Yeah, we'll try to deal with those issues. So anyway, the working group, as I say, is just starting. And right now, moving on the slides, what I'd like to do is cover, how we make the connection between these, the statute, NEIMA, ANS and its charter, and RIPB concepts and methods. So in my mind, again, I'm speaking only for myself, and I'm not a lawyer, but I see that that NEIMA represents statutory obligations on the part of certain agencies to support advanced reactor in at least in my estimation in ways that I have not seen before. So ANS can help realize, I believe, NEIMA's aspirations by working with NRC and DOE. And the basis for any unique ANS contribution could be the specialized expertise within our technical divisions. Also, the ANS Standards Committee is a knowledge center for RIPB concepts and methods. So if we can bring all these things together and show that we can work with NRC and DOE to advance the cause of advanced reactors, then I think we should be doing so. So, and it's not that we haven't done anything along these lines in the past. We have, we have had some past activities, but in my estimation, they have not been very impactful. The specific provisions of NEIMA correspond so closely to ANS activities that, again, I believe that ANS has a duty as one of the stakeholders to get the activities under NEIMA right. So, next slide. So let's get into NEIMA and RIPB. So if you look at sections 2, 3, 102, and 103 in the statute, I think you'll find implicit and explicit references to RIPB. Now, by implicit reference, I think of something like what's in the purpose statement. It says that NEIMA should address expertise and regulatory processes to allow innovation and commercialization of advanced reactors. The point is that innovation and commercialization were not disallowed prior to NEIMA. So what did NEIMA actually have to do? It's just that I think it's a recognition that merely allowing innovation does not promote advanced reactor development. And it doesn't bring about the kinds of improvements in the regulation and economic considerations that go into advanced reactors. And modernization in the name of the statute has, I think, come to mean that it uses RIPB concepts and methods. A more explicit reference to RIPB is in what is defined in section 3 as technology inclusive regulatory framework. This definition talks about methods of evaluation that are flexible and practicable for application to a variety of technologies. It also talks about RIPB techniques should be used where appropriate. Now, I think the default condition should be use of RIPB is what it should come to mind first. And if it's not to be used, there should be a good reason for it. But these are the sorts of things that you know, we can discuss as we think more deeply about NEIMA. Next slide. So in section 102, it deals with NRC user fees and annual charges. And it also includes NRC reporting requirements. Section 102C calls for a report to increase the use of RIPB evaluation techniques and regulatory guidance. This report was issued, I guess, 6 months after the statute became law, which was, I think, January of 2019. So it's out there, but I'm not really sure, you know, how all these things that relate to RIPB, you know, have been addressed in it and how they continue to be addressed in the reports to Congress. And so, I mean, this is the sort of thing that maybe we ought to spend more time keeping track of and see whether there is increase in the use of RIPB concepts and methods in the documents submitted. Section 102C includes coordination and stakeholder input. And among those whose input is to be sought are the nuclear energy industry, a diverse set of technology developers, and other public stakeholders. So I would suggest that other stakeholders includes ANS and therefore the Advanced Reactor Working Group. Next slide. So section 103 is entitled the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Program. And within it, subsection 103A deals with licensing, 103B deals with report to establish stages in the commercial advanced nuclear reactor licensing process. 103C deals with report to increase the use of risk-informed and performance-based evaluation techniques and regulatory guidance. So licensing includes staged licensing and what they call risk-informed licensing. And this covers, it requires actually development and implementation of strategies, it says where appropriate, strategies for the increased use of risk-informed performance-based licensing, evaluation techniques, and guidance for commercial advanced nuclear reactors within the existing regulatory framework, and including evaluation techniques and guidance for the resolution of specific topics. But what caught my eye is it deals with development and implementation of strategies, and it is directed towards increased use of RIPB, and it covers licensing, evaluation, and guidance within the existing regulatory framework. And this also deals with the technology inclusive regulatory framework associated with ongoing rulemaking. So the question is, do we ANS have input to offer to increase the likelihood that the purpose of NEIMA will be better realized? Next slide. So continuing with section 103, 103B is related to standards. And in it, it talks about collaboration with standard setting organizations to identify specific technical areas for which new and updated standards are needed, and providing assistance, if appropriate, to ensure the new and updated standards are developed and finalized in a timely fashion. So I'd like to ask, do we have any input to this? I know that in development of standards, we could certainly use some assistance. So, so is there something that we can do about it? And that's part of what I'm suggesting, the Advanced Reactor Working Group may consider. So under subsection 103C, about increasing the use of RIPB, it includes the ability of NRC to develop and implement RIPB evaluation techniques and guidance to resolve, these important technical topics. But the point is that, the NRC itself, needs to improve its ability to handle these kinds of concepts and methods. So the Advanced Reactor Working Group recognizes the ongoing activities on the part of various parties in this, but I do think that there are gaps that ANS could highlight and fill. Next slide.
Prasad, are you asking for comments now, or do you want to wait till the end?
Let's see, I guess if you have any comments on the statute itself, I mean, that section of my presentation covered what I think of as, as my reading of the statute. So if you have any comments or questions on that part, maybe now would be an appropriate time.
Well, I think the statute is self-evident, but I also think that if we aren't in a position to provide them with what they're asking for, I don't know who would be necessarily, because we know better than anyone else what have been the problems. All right, so to me, a lot of this is the formulation of of useful problem statements that we can use to develop answers around. So that's just my thought.
Okay.
This is Paul Canwine. I just, I guess, you know, kind of thinking about what you were talking about. I guess a big question I have is really, there was a discussion of RIPB, licensing evaluation techniques, and I guess I'm really not aware of accepted techniques for RIP licensing evaluation. I mean, is that something that's missing?
Well, I think there is a lot of information on it, and you know, this goes. Your question goes to even the introduction to this this presentation, where I said that people are not familiar with what exists. So I don't know if the specific question you ask has been addressed, but you know, I can talk to you separately if you want, and you know, I can tell you what's out there, because that's really one of the key things that we want to accomplish. ANS as a knowledge center on these topics, and to the extent that people want to know what exists, we should be able to offer guidance. So, you know, I think we need to do more, obviously, to let people know what exists. So.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I'm just getting involved is that I'm thinking that ANS can provide, you know, standard the evaluation process for risk-informed you know, licensing considerations. I mean, that's you know, I'm at Oak Ridge right now, but I'm coming from a fuel vendor, and you know, that was my experience, is that, you know, you have to have a common framework to actually really consider a risk-informed you know, approach, and it just didn't feel like there was any really common framework.
Well, I will cover that in an upcoming slide. So
yeah.
Please
okay.
pay attention, and I'll draw your attention to it when I get to that slide. So,
hey Prasad, this is Don. Is there something that we can, or Pat can provide to those on the call here, of a document or references, whatever, that we can read to better understand and bring us more up to date on what you're talking about?
Well, Don, you know as well as I do, we've been trying to, you know, finalize a document that does something along these lines, and that is the RP3C guidance document, you know, that we've been working on, that has been under review within the standards committee. It's now getting close to being finalized. A draft version is on the ANS RP3C webpage. So, you know, there is something out there that I can point to, but, you know, people wouldn't know about it unless they know where to look. And so that's part of the problem we are trying to address.
Okay, well, yeah, I think everyone appreciates that feedback and comment. So that's something that, and I'm aware of where we stand on the most recent initiative, okay, on the guidelines. So if the timing is good, then maybe we should wait until that is complete, and then they'll have that available.
Sure.
Okay.
So anyway, I do want to address, you know, what we've done so far. You know, under OPD, there was an initiative early in 2021, and the ANS president issued a letter to NRC, you know, on March 3rd, related to the Part 53 rulemaking on this. And the letter conveyed support for the structure of the rulemaking and expressed some concerns about specific details. And to some extent, I guess, later rule language, did try to address some of it, but it's not clear how much was really addressed, especially, again, in my reading of it, certain aspects that I think are unnecessarily prescriptive. We, ANS...
Prasad, do you mind, do you happen to have an example of that we could just use to like try to get a perspective?
I'm not in a position to do that right
okay, that's
now,
fine.
Jim,
I just
but,
wondered.
We can deal with it. If you look at that letter and also, the presentation that we made to ACRS on March 17th, I think we laid out quite a bit. And, I'd just like to be able to see more clearly, where ANS input does have an impact, so that we can all do better with NEIMA's realization. So let's see, Steve Nesbitt had a question. Let me see. I know that the NRC...
It wasn't really a question, Prasad. I just wanted to put forward an example of, people were asking about examples of risk-informed regulation, and I just held up the LMP as an example of how there has been some consideration in some areas.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not very good at reading the chat box as I go along. So I appreciate your articulating that, Steve. So next slide. So this is where I'd like to suggest, where we need to go. On the bottom line on this slide is that I'm proposing that in terms of guidance for what RIPB means, I think it already exists. The Commission issued a white paper on risk-informed performance-based regulation in March of 1999. That is the SRM to SECI 98-144. And yet, not enough people know that the Commission's position on this, which in my mind is equal to a policy statement, is there for everybody to use. So in section 3 of NEIMA, where there are definitions of terms, there is no definition for RIPB. And I would suggest that the Commission's white paper should be that definition. 103 refers to RIPB evaluation techniques and guidance within the existing regulatory framework. Now, what does that mean? I think it's reasonable to interpret evaluation techniques and guidance to be the standard review plan provisions, the interim staff guidance, the regulatory guidance that have been coming out. So all of these things. And many of them are dealing with the existing regulatory framework, which in my mind is Part 50 and Part 52. So, by this interpretation, it would seem like, the SRP sections and reg guides that have been issued recently to support Part 50 and 52 should have included strategies for RIPB implementation. So considering the number of advanced reactor developers planning on using parts 50 and 52, and I would suggest that this sort of goes to the question that was posed about Oklo. that one place to begin is for everybody to anchor their understanding of RIPB on this SRM to SECI 98144. Next slide. What I see as opportunities for ANS contributions is that, we can really help develop the expertise and regulatory processes broadly to support advanced reactors in its technical programs. We can highlight the specifics of what it means in specific situations to allow innovation and commercialization. We can address specifics of technology inclusive activities to examine whether methods of evaluation are using RIPB to enable flexibility and practicability for various technologies. ANS can examine reports to Congress to assess whether they reflect appropriate use of RIPB within the existing regulatory framework. And ANS can spotlight where regulatory provisions, evaluation techniques, and guidance are unnecessarily prescriptive. Sometimes this happens just by limiting the range of choices available to advanced reactor developers. And I think there have been instances of this happening. Next slide. So if ANS is an active stakeholder, then I would say that we would be helping the US, reach the objectives of NEIMA, along with the participation of many government and non-government entities. And as a technical society with members steeped in every aspect of nuclear technology, I think ANS is in a better position to get into technical details in a way that many other stakeholders would not be able to get into. And I think ANS is not really encumbered by specific agendas in a way that many other parties involved may be. We should consciously be aware of what gaps exist in the positions taken by stakeholders, and especially in the application of RIPB concepts and methods, because I'm not really sure other stakeholders have as much interest in this area as we do, at least as I do anyway. Anyway, that's where I'm trying to get the Advanced Reactor Working Group to really to make a contribution and take it up to the ANS. And of course, we also want to make sure that other technical divisions have an opportunity to contribute. And lastly, the standards committee itself, and RP3C is part of the standards committee. We have a wealth of information in the community of practice webinars on our web page, and there are recorded sessions that anybody can access. You don't even have to be a member of ANS to do this. So ANS can do a lot as a stakeholder, and I think we are trying to explore what we can accomplish. Next slide. So in summary, we instituted, the ANS instituted the Advanced Reactor Working Group to have a focal point for advanced reactor activities within and outside the society. So what we will try to emphasize is bringing the technical expertise of the society to address a whole range of issues. You know, especially with RIPB concepts and methods, I think ANS can make a significant contribution. And NEIMA includes requirements involving RIPB, which constitute opportunities where ANS can really add value to ongoing proceedings and activities. So that's my presentation. I'd like to now open it up, you know, for questions and comments.
Yeah, Prasad, this is Rob again. I'm still thinking about my question earlier about the risk of not having NRC approve an application versus the performance cost of having a few select patents paid for and issued to protect proprietary information. I know that a lot of these next generation reactors, fission batteries or microreactors, have a lot of proprietary information that the vendors are not disclosing, which is fine. But if it's going to cost them time in terms of an NRC application, in terms of schedule and effort, that there's some balancing that would need to take place where they could, if they had the guidance, come up with how to decide what patents are necessary to give them that proprietary information protection while still allowing them to do full disclosure so that the NRC will have a much higher likelihood of granting them their license, assuming that they do have an appropriate safety basis.
Thanks, Rob. And I think Steve would like to address that. He has his hand up, and I was hoping that he would come forward. Steve, go ahead.
Sure. Well, thanks, Rob. You know, I think so. Two things I want to say. One is that I have a rule of trying to avoid getting between the licensee and the regulator. So I'm not going to opine too much on the Oklo situation. They're working through that, and I don't think that their issue was really wrapped around the proprietary issues. You know, NRC has a long history of dealing with companies that want to keep technology and methods and things like that proprietary, and they've got a whole rigmarole set up of, you know, proprietary information and withholding disclosure from the public and things like that, and I don't think that's the root cause of the Oklo issue. I do think it is interesting to observe that Oklo's, you know, they chose not to make an RIPB based application, you know, and so they're kind of off in a different world over there, and it's a challenge to make the current regulations work for something like a microreactor that it doesn't, you know, it wasn't envisioned for when the regulations were written. So they have a tough job, but I just don't think that it's the, I think the methodology for handling proprietary information is pretty well established, I guess.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? So if there aren't any questions, you know, we try to keep these community of practice sessions under an hour. We are about 45 minutes into the session. So, you know, if there are no further questions or comments, I want to thank everybody.
Prasad.
Yeah, sure.
Not so fast.
Oh, okay. Well, I tried to give everybody the chance to speak up, but
well, I'm sorry. He who speaks last is the slowest. So, at various times you referred to the existing regulatory framework, and I have a feeling we all feel like we know what that is, and I conjecture that we all have different understandings anyway. And it seems to me that, you know, detailed application of the existing framework would just be a a pointless quagmire. So I assume that when people talk about using the existing framework, they mean like the really high level aspects of it, like there'll be licensing basis events and stuff like that. But at some level of detail, it stops being relevant. Can you possibly speak to that point?
Well, I mean, I can just give you my own view on it. You know, I don't know how many different perspectives there may be on what the existing regulatory framework is, but to me, you know, Part 50 and Part 52 are the existing regulatory framework. Part 50, what it means is that, you know, you have to put forward principal design criteria as provided in the regulation 5034. And that also goes to Part 52. Part 52 has the requirement for a PRA, and it also includes something called the ITAC. ITAC is not part of Part 50, but you know, so to me, what the existing regulatory framework means is the combination of Part 50 and 52 with some of these things included. And the thing about Part 52 is that it actually involves rule making, because if an application is received for a design certification that is acted on in the form of a rulemaking, and you know, that offers many opportunities to implement things like risk-informed performance-based approaches. And I don't think people have taken advantage of that. So I mean, again, I'm just offering my own view on this. There are others. I think there's at least one or two people from NRC, and perhaps they can speak up. In fact,
well, Prasad, this is Jim August. Let me just say briefly, you know, from the commercial side, the existing framework is largely Part 50. But now if you're building a new reactor like Vogel is, 3 and 4, a huge part of that is Part 52. But again, Part 52 to a large degree carries forward most of Part 50 with some new terms and some new methods. So for example, Prasad mentioned ITACs. ITACs is a new name, but it's really nothing new. It's just a way of verifying conformance. It's a type of test to verify conformance to specifications that is part of the licensing process. So you know, there's in the commercial side of the world, Part 50 is more or less the legacy application that we're talking about.
But I guess I had conjectured that the things like the LMP, you know, you could sort of crosswalk them back to elements of Part 50, but that the sort of legal process document kabuki that goes on there is not what the LMP was after.
Well, I think you're right. It was after providing some kind of a framework for new designs. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Prasad.
Well, I mean, you know, there's a whole lot of background associated with what Bob Youngblood just brought up and what you brought up, you know. But the point is that over the past couple of years, you know, 2020, 2021, there have been a lot of you know, SRP sections and ISGs and regulatory guides issued, which totally ignore risk-informed performance-based approaches, in my mind. You know, and I think that's contrary to what NEIMA requires. And that's part of what we tried to point out in the ANS letter, but we didn't I mean, we didn't really say specifically about NEIMA in there. We did talk about it, but I mean, this is the sort of thing where maybe the Advanced Reactor Working Group can do a better job of, you know, clarifying and highlighting what needs to happen. So.
Hey, Prasad, if I can chime in again, this is
Sure.
Steve.
Please.
I think I'm gonna boil down a lot of your presentation and discussion into a statement that maybe an important key role that ANS can play in this development of a workable regulatory framework for advanced reactors is to kind of be the conscience for RIPB, maybe a pest if you want to put it a different way, but you know, to be looking over the shoulder of the regulator, and in some cases the industry, to make sure that they don't lose sight of that important element of the new framework. And I think I've seen that work already. In you know, I think that the NRC has a tough job on their hands, and they're trying to do the right thing. And I think we can be helpful in that regard. So I guess what I'm saying is I endorse your general philosophy there, that I think that is a key role for ANS and the Advanced Reactor Working Group to play. Not the only thing that they need to be doing, but, you know, or that we need to be doing, I should say. But I do think it's important to sort of be the conscience for RIPB.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm glad that I'm headed in the right direction. When you asked me to take up this this challenge, you know, I wasn't sure where I'd go, but I think maybe I'm doing something right. So.
Well, Prasad, one other comment to just sort of add to this, you know, we have an opportunity here to do as little or as much as we'd like. And I think that there is an opportunity to put a lot of issues on the table that, frankly, in the old framework have been, they've been nettling points that have just festered for many years. That this offers an opportunity to go back and look at some of that stuff and clear it out of the way using, for example, a performance-based approach, or even a risk-informed approach to say it really has virtually no risk. So why don't we just eliminate? For example, at Vogtle, there are around 900 legacy commitments that, frankly, about 450 of them have to do with preventive maintenance from vendor manuals from startup. That is the most irrelevant and, pardon me, garbage. I apologize, but I think it's just pure garbage, but it's still out there kludging up their books. So that's the kind of thing I think we could go after if we wanted to.
Well, thank you, Jim. Now, before we reach the end, I do want to address a couple of points raised in the chat. It says, does NEIMA provide any funding support? My reading of NEIMA is that there is an opportunity for you know, DOE to provide funding support, but I don't know if we have pursued it. Another suggestion from John Mahoney is that the human factors division, you know, should be part of the Advanced Reactor Working Group. I think that's entirely appropriate to consider. As I've said, that we are just getting started. And, you know, I would certainly look to the division and see if they are interested in being part of this, and then we can work it out. So I'm not sure there's anything else that I need to address, but if there's something that I haven't addressed, please bring it up.
Prasad, if I might just offer my final comment, not to what you're saying, but you made a point on one of your slides towards the end of your presentation on a roadmap, some of the things we've been talking about right now, like the licensing framework and the need for emphasis on RIPB, et cetera, this roadmap could capture some of these things that we think would be appropriate for this working group to get engaged or involved in, close to the particular source or just from an overall perspective. So it's something to keep in mind. I think a roadmap that I know all of us are familiar with is one way of trying to capture everything and making a decision on how to move forward on what's important, what's not important. Just my final comment.
Thank you, Don. You're a member of the working group, and certainly you can, we'll include that as an agenda item the next time around. So anyway, I think at this point, I'd like to again thank everybody for participating in this webinar. This has been recorded, and if you know of people who have an interest in this, you can tell them that that they can go to the RP3C webpage and take advantage of the slides and the recording. So again, thank you very much all. Kathy, I think we can, call an end to this.
Okay, thank you, Prasad. Have a good weekend.
Thank you all. Bye. Be
Thank you.
safe.